Welcome back. Tonight we are focusing on leadership and integrity. We're having Professor Minja, who is from the Department of Public Policy and Administration here in Kenyatta University, to sort of delve into that particular issue. We have seen that every electioneering period, the electorates are blinded to the fact of choosing leaders who have questionable character. Welcome, Professor Minja.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
All right. So first things first, there has been a question that is it possible to have an ethical person but without integrity? Even before we get into the nitty-gritty of this discussion, is that possible?
No, it's actually not possible for you to be ethical and you don't practice a life of integrity, because both go together. When you talk about ethics, you talk about who we are and who we should be and what we do, the aspect of either doing the right thing or the wrong thing. When we talk about integrity, we are actually talking about our daily practice in terms of acceptable norms and values. So there is no way you can be a person of integrity and at the same time in your daily practice you don't exhibit those acceptable norms and values. Yeah. So you have to have both. Actually, integrity is subsumed in ethics. Yeah, the aspect of who we are, what we do, so how you view life, how you treat others, generally your character and how you exhibit that character. So both go together.
All right.
You cannot have one and not the other. Yeah.
We're having corruption in the country and we're having leaders, key leaders being involved or being accused of being corrupt. Recently we saw the Sirisia Member of Parliament, John Waluke, of course being sentenced due to issues of corruption. Do you think corruption and lack of national values has been our greatest undoing when it comes to people who lead us as a nation?
We have national values. Actually, the Constitution is clear about our national values. We also have Chapter 6 that guides public officers and public servants and state officers, how they should behave. But you find that the major problem, actually the greatest problem, is the people who elect leaders into offices. That's where the issue is. So if the citizens can actually do the right thing, there is no question of us having bad leaders. The issue of saying that bad leaders come from the community, I don't buy that, because they are still good people in the community, but they must determine to put good leadership in place. But you'll find there are many reasons actually why the public don't put good leaders into office. For example, there is a concept we call epistocracy, where you find the voters irrationally putting in office people who don't deserve to be in those offices, making wrong decisions, either for one reason or another. But they irrationally do it. So either because they've been influenced or swayed or something like that. So that is a key factor why we actually find bad leaders in leadership. The second one for me is when the popular saying that we have, when we say that actually bad leaders are elected by good people. When good people fail to vote. Because there's a question of apathy. Yeah, good people feel they don't want to go out and queue and put in place a good person. So instead now, bad people will elect one of their own. So you find ultimately a bad leader being elected by the people who are irrational.
Yeah. So you have talked about Chapter 6 of the Constitution, which is on leadership and integrity, and of course the aspect of voter apathy. It is slowly setting into the country. Even after the 2017 general election, we sort of saw some sort of voter apathy, and which is something that is now getting into the society, which means that we'll keep having bad leaders because people don't want to vote, or they don't want to know who is going to take the mantle to lead them. What can we do to ensure that this voter apathy does not set in, because it is quickly setting in even to the common mwananchi down there? He says, I don't think I can go to vote again. After all, bad leaders keep getting those positions. Is there a cure to that particular vibe?
Yes, there is. But it will not come from the politicians, because majority of our politicians so to say, are not good leaders. They're bad leaders. So it will come from outside of politics. If citizens are to elect good leaders, then there must be a critical number of people, a critical mass must be developed that actually understands the why of elections and the why of putting good leaders in place, so that they come and educate the masses, they raise awareness, they could come from either religious institutions, civil society, the media. All these people have a role to play. But when they also become biased, and they kind of want to support one of their own who is not essentially ethical or a person of integrity, then again we'll still have a problem. But I would say actually that there is need for the society to come up with a system, and the systems are there, I would say, of educating the masses, so that the masses, when they go to vote, they will vote in good leaders. Yeah. So for me, there is hope, even in the midst of this voter apathy. It should actually not be there. Why do we have voter apathy? Because already we have poor leaders in those positions, and people are expecting a lot of things from people who cannot provide. You know, it's like having a rock and expecting a rock to give you some water. It doesn't make sense. So people put in bad leaders, and they expect those bad leaders to do good. How would you expect salt to taste like sugar? It's impossible. It doesn't happen. So leaders, now good leaders, either from religious societies or from civil society, must tell the people that this is what we look for when we go to vote. This is the kind of leader we need. And not the person who give you money, or the person who comes from your clan, or this and that, because that still is a form of corruption. Even when the voter is being bribed to vote in a bad person, even the voter is corrupt. Yeah, but I think for me, it's easier to educate the voter, because the voter may be doing it out of ignorance, but the leaders up there, they have determined to be evil. So all you need to do is to get rid of them, remove them from those offices, and put in good people. And there are good people out there who are willing to lead and provide the kind of leadership that is credible, that will promote the welfare of the citizens, but they don't have a chance because wicked leaders are the ones who are actually, yeah.
So you have talked about the systems, and some have said that our system, judicial system, prosecution system, are somewhat to blame for these quote-unquote bad leaders getting into such positions, because during every election hearing period, certain leaders who have been known, a person is innocent until proven guilty, but there is that questionable character. But we don't see the prosecution agencies, or maybe the judicial system, sort of get these leaders to answer for what crime they have committed, which gives the leaders a leeway to continue leading the nation even with their questionable character. So can we say that judicial system and the prosecution agencies have failed this nation in ensuring that these bad leaders get a backstage when it comes to the leadership of the country?
I would say yes and no. So I have two answers, two opposites. Yes, because sometimes we find the judicial system or the judicial officers somehow being lenient to those people of questionable characters, leniency. Then I'll also say no, in the sense that also at times you find that because the threshold for corruption is not that high in this country, so they get away with it. And the judicial officer works with already established law. So they will not create their own. So they'll say, this is the threshold provided by the law, and therefore I don't find you guilty. Perhaps the cure to this is to make our threshold very high in law. And who is it that is going to enact those laws? Politicians. And who is it that we are really saying are corrupt? Politicians. So are they willing to create that high threshold in terms of integrity? No. Yeah. But if we had that high threshold where we say that if you have been blamed for something, if you've been accused, even if not proven guilty, first of all, clear yourself before you go for public office. Yeah. That is a very high threshold. And now people will be careful. But now they know that the law actually gives them a leeway to get away with it for as long as they have not been proven guilty. They have not been found guilty. They can do whatever they want and still seek for public offices. They will get them. In any case, you know, they have the money because they got the money through those illegal means and they are able to buy their votes. So you find it's just a vicious circle of bad leaders getting in and entrenching themselves, and citizens continuing to complain, and they are part of the game. So it's just vicious circle.
All right. You pointed a critical part there, which now wants to move to a sentiment that the late president for Tanzania, Mwalimu Nyerere, once said that Kenya is a man-eat-man society, which is a statement that has sort of resonated with what we are facing right now, a man-eat-man society as compared to Tanzania. Of course, Tanzania embraced socialism, we embrace capitalism. Do you think the sort of path we took is what is eating us as a society?
As far as I'm concerned, capitalism is not bad, as long as it is checked. I wouldn't say Kenya is a man-eat-man society, but it's a shark eat small fish society. That's how I see it. So the problem is not us down here. The problem is with the sharks, because the sharks will swallow all the fish. In any case, sharks feed on fish. So they do it because that's the nature of things. But that can change, in the sense that if us who vote, or us who actually decide to have this law, especially in referendum, like the constitution, the way we had a referendum and we said yes, we need this constitution. If the citizens were mobilized enough to say, no, there's a problem here, we reject this is not the kind of leadership we want, see, that we can change. But again, like I said earlier, this change must come from people outside of the politics. People who will see the ills that are in politics and tell the citizens, now we have to have a revolution, kind of silent, in not with guns and violence, but in terms of our minds, in terms of our thinking, in terms of our attitudes, in terms of behavior. That must change at our level and determine and tell these guys up there, enough, it's enough.
Yeah, you've talked about creating awareness and some sort of revolution, of course, being pushed by the non-governmental organization and the civil society at large. But there has been a problem. We have seen negativity by the government when non-governmental organizations try to take a sort of a stand when it comes to politics. I will cite a case during 2017 general elections, where the government then, led by President Uhuru Kenyatta, decided to crack down on the non-governmental organizations because they had taken a stand on matters politics, of course, because he was vying at that particular general election. So where do civil society stand when themselves they're threatened by the government that is in place? Do they really have a chance with the sort of negativity that is being spread about them by the government?
Yeah, they do. They still have a chance. One of the things I would say about civil society, they must prove beyond no doubt that they are actually serving the common mwananchi, as opposed to the perception at times that they are serving some foreign masters. If that is seen to be the case, they will be fought by the system. If they are seen to be fighting for the rights, the welfare, the wellness of the common person, the citizen, they will be supported by the citizens, even when they are being fought by the top government officials. And so what will the citizens do? They'll stand with these civil society institutions, and these institutions will continue building their capacity. And when it comes now to an election, the citizens will be equipped enough to choose the right leaders. So all they ought to do is to stick to their guns as long as they operate within the law, and they are not doing it for their own selfish gains, but they are doing it to benefit the common person. Then that way, they still have a strong reason to exist. And they'll be supported by the citizens this time, not the government. You see, something else that perhaps for me, I don't like with us Kenyans. We think the government is those big guys and girls up there. That is why we say serikali. That's why we say hawa watu. But when we come to the realization that we have the power to remove those big boys and girls up there, that is the time Kenya will start changing the state of apathy and helplessness. Because what we have now is perhaps what is called land helplessness. Land helplessness is a situation where we just drop our arms and say, whatever will be, will be. Me, I have no power to change things. That's land helplessness. Yet, we have a lot of power with us to change things. The vote. That vote that I have is a tool that can actually change the entire country. See what has happened in Malawi. It has actually established a system that has been there for ages. It can happen with Kenya. Kenya is not any different. But if we continue in that state of land helplessness as citizens, then the system that is already here will continue. Yeah. So again, I will say it is us. We must wake up and say, now, we are the people who will decide who to rule us. If you have been tainted, don't even bother. Yes, the government can give you the ticket through their party, because again, you know, parties in Kenya are not political institutions. They are individual programs. That's what I call them. Parties in Kenya are individual programs meant to propel an individual to a high office. But if we had this party of people, led by the people themselves, the people will decide and say, okay, you may have that favored party, but as long as this other one is registered by government, then we will elect a leader through this unknown party. And this leader will come into power and change things. Because all we need is credible people with the masses. And the masses understand the need to have credible leadership if things are going to change in this country. Because what we have and what we are missing in this country actually is credible leadership. Leadership that is for the people. But when you start thinking about what about me, how will it be for me in the next 50 years as a leader, you may be dead. Adam Smith said in the long run all of us will be dead. So, you know, thinking of years beyond where you are, so you fail to focus on serving people.
Because of looking at the future.
Yes, and you start serving self. And that's why citizens are complaining. Yeah.
Well, you have talked about credible leadership, and I'd want to mention, cite examples of credible leaders who get into politics, but within time they are swallowed by the bad system, so to speak. I don't want to mention name to avoid being sued for defamation, but we have seen leaders who at first they came out as credible leaders, but once they got into the system, they got swallowed into the system, and you can no longer recognize them. So Mwananchi has that particular fear that even if I choose this credible leader, once he gets into the system, he will become just like them. So how are we supposed to see that and ensure that we are not drawn back by the sites or the examples that we have seen in the society in terms of leadership?
I would say perhaps I'll look at it two ways. One, the law of numbers. If you just have one lone voice, for example, in parliament, that voice will be drowned. So even if a credible person is elected in one constituency, and we have this number, I don't know how many constituencies we have, 200 or something, then 1 out of 200 is nothing. But if nationally citizens elected a critical mass of credible people, that would change things. the few corrupt individuals, whether in parliament or in the executive or in the judiciary, they will be swallowed. There will be a thing of the past. They will have actually to comply, because it's either you shape up or shape out. But this time, when we only have 2-3 people in parliament, and they have been known to be people of integrity, when they go there, they may not actually compromise their principles, but they'll keep quiet. They'll be cowed down, their voices will be drowned, and they'll not be heard anymore. That, perhaps, for me, is the reason. The second reason, that's the first one. The second one is that even the credible people we elect, the few, sometimes they're not courageous enough to put their lives on the line. I mean, not in terms of being martyrs, but in terms of saying, this is wrong, it cannot continue, I disagree with this. I think, again, we have very few people who are willing to sacrifice their reputation or their job. Like, for example, the people that were thrown out of positions last week, I was happy. I mean, be thrown out, but go out with your head high. Yes, and just do the right thing. Yeah. But don't compromise. If your principles tell you this is the way to go, don't compromise for the sake of opposition. Yeah, just lose it with your head high. Because, you know, when you are a leader, it doesn't matter whether you have a big position or a small position. You'll still influence people. Leaders influence people for the common good. So even if I do not hold this big position, and I know that I am a good leader, I will still influence people regardless of where I am in the society.
Okay, now they say that the Constitution of Kenya is one of the best constitutions we have in the world. But when you look at what is happening in the country, you wouldn't say that we are, of course, ruled by that particular constitution. Some will be surprised that we have Chapter 6 of the Constitution, which talks about leadership and integrity. So how do we ensure that we implement some of the laws that we put into place? They're not just books or reports being put in a shelf. They're being administered and implemented at the society level, because you cannot be having a good constitution, but the society is rotten.
The sad bit with our constitutionalism and everything is that it's like the constitution was made for the underdogs, the citizens, and not for the top leadership and politicians. Because the politicians will actually contravene provisions of the Constitution. They get away with it. But a small person, the following day, they will be in jail. So you find that non-compliance of the law across the board, non-accountability by all, that is what we are missing. If there is accountability at the top, there will be total accountability down there. So the problem is actually not even the person down here. Because we can talk of a good constitution and say this is the law. But one thing that is certain when it comes to behavior is that it's not just about the codified ethics, the ethics we talked about, that this is the law, this is how you should behave. There is the aspect of observing the leader. And when you observe the leader and the leader behaves differently, that has a stronger outcome than even complying with the law. Let me give you an example because it was in media. During this period of COVID-19, we were told to social distance, we were told to keep distance, no social gatherings and all that. Yet, we saw politicians dining, whining, partying, and giving press briefs comfortably, and nobody, no police officer, no security agent ever bothered to go and arrest them because they needed to be arrested. But because they are in good books with the establishment, so they were allowed to get away with it. Then at the same time later, you see another gathering that is perceived not to be pro-system. It is scattered. Double standards. So until such a time that we will hold everybody accountable equally, that is the time we will actually have trust in government. Because I always say, because I'm a lecturer, and when I teach governance, I tell people it's not enough to have a legal government that has been constituted legally. It is equally important to have a legitimate government. And you can have a legal government that is illegitimate. When we talk of legitimacy, we talk about acceptability. Am I comfortable with my government? As far as I'm concerned, is it legitimate as far as I'm concerned? So you can have a government that is legal, but illegitimate.
Yeah.
I mean, it is not accepted by the majority of the people. The majority of the people are actually, they feel pained about the kind of leadership they see. So every government must endeavor to be both legal and legitimate. And legitimacy is actually crowded out by those kinds of events. When people are not treated equally, when people do not observe the law equally, there are those who get away with it, there are those who account up to the last iota of the law. So if that discrimination is seen, then people no longer have trust and respect for their government. Yeah. Because again, when it comes to respect and loyalty, you cannot demand people to be loyal to you. You can force them to comply, but that does not mean they are loyal to you as a leader, or they respect you as a leader, because there's a difference between fear and respect. I can fear you, but I don't respect you. But for me, because respect is earned, loyalty is earned, trust is earned. It's like a leader coming and saying, or going to my department as a chair of department, telling my colleagues, trust me. That will not make them trust me. Am I trustworthy? Have they looked at me and they have seen me to be trustworthy? If they have not, then forget about it. I will not be trusted.
Right. Professor Minja, you've talked about us having a hope despite what we're witnessing in the society currently. So as we wind up, what will be your way forward in terms of looking at our leadership, in terms of adhering to leadership and integrity? Is there a way forward that you can, of course, mention that will touch on the common mwananchi and the top leadership up there?
There is hope, I said. And the hope is in us, not in leaders. So for me, I'll call out all people, all leaders, all influencers of goodwill to educate the masses, create a critical mass of people, so that when it comes 2022, we'll be going for people who are credible, not crowd swingers and people who have always been there and we have not seen anything from them, but people who are out to provide leadership that benefits the person. So that it's, as a leader, it's not about me, it's about the people I lead. So for me, the hope is in mobilizing the citizens. We still have time to do that. We have 2 years to do that. We can actually rally all the citizens. When we talk about, there's a term I hate saying Wanjiku. For me, Wanjiku is derogatory.
Okay.
That's me, eh? So I should not be misquoted. In the sense that you think like this Wanjiku is just some small, helpless mwananchi down there. And yet, this mwananchi is the one who should actually determine the destiny of this nation by the kind of leadership the mwananchi puts in place. So for me, there is hope for as long as we are willing not to be irrational when it comes to voting. We vote in the right leaders. Even if they are not known, they are coming from obscurity, but they have what it takes to take this nation to the next level. Those are the kind of leaders we need. Let's go back to the Bible. King David he was a nothing, as far as I'm concerned. He was from nowhere. Yet he is the one who held the destiny of this country. And I think this is what we should look at as Kenyans. We look for someone maybe from obscurity, from nowhere, but this person is known to have had a track record. They ran a certain company somewhere or a certain department in government. This is how they have been. Because leadership principles cut across the board. It's only the context that changes. But if I am an effective leader at my level now, as a chair, for example, of a department, I can be an effective leader as a lead, as a head of a ministry, as a head of government, as a head of something else, because I'll still apply the same principles. And those are the kind of leaders we should start looking for. And then the media should also take their role in terms of bringing them into the limelight, the kind of leaders that this nation would want to have. So it has to be systemic in approach. Everyone must be involved. The media, the civil society, the citizens. We must say, hey, this is the person we need, or these are the people we need, because they have proved trustworthy wherever they have served.
All right. Lastly, I want us to talk about this book here on transformational corporate leadership, which is by Karim Mbarin and David Minja. If the camera person can get the shot of that book, I want you to briefly talk about this book and what it entails. Of course, we can't talk about leadership and integrity without creating awareness, which can be created through the books we write. So kindly give us a brief on what the book is all about.
Yeah, this book, thank you. This book is about leadership. When we did this book, the challenge was I was actually provoked by my postgraduate students when I started quoting some big names up in the US and Canada and wherever else, especially where I got trained. And they asked me, you're always talking about these companies. Who are they? We don't know them. You're talking about these leaders. Don't we have local leaders? So I went back and I told my colleague, can't we identify people who have excelled in good leadership in this country and actually document their cases together with a theory behind it? And that's how we came up with what we call transformational corporate leadership. We were saying we know there are good leaders out there, and we gave examples. We have even given companies names here because we interviewed CEOs. I sat with the CEOs myself, those that we had perceived to be good leaders, and those that we had listened to their employees, and they were saying, oh, so and so is a great leader. And we wanted to know what is it that they were doing. And so we documented this book. We have talked about ethics. We have talked about strategic leadership. We have talked about transformational leadership and how leaders transform their institutions and the people they serve, how to create a culture of values. All that is in this book. Yeah.
Okay, of course, I'll be sure to read some of it because I'm interested in politics and governance, and of course get to see what you've written in terms of leadership and integrity. But apart from that, thank you for making time and giving us an insightful perspective when it comes to leadership and integrity. It is a discussion that we can have even as we continue to educate the masses on how we should choose our leaders and what we should put in place.
Thank you.
All right, that has been Professor David Minja, who is a chair in the Department of Public Policy and Administration here in Kenyatta University, and he's also a lecturer, of course, saying that there is hope when it comes to ensuring that the leaders we put in place are leaders who do not have questionable character. The tool is in our hands. We are taking a short break, but we will be back in a moment. Stay tuned.